There we go. Hey man, how are you?
I'm good. You doing all right, Coach?
I'm good. It's good to see you, man. I'm glad we could find some time. I appreciate you. I know you said you were catching a former player. What game was he playing in yesterday?
They played in the Celebration Bowl in Atlanta.
Oh, okay.
So it was a heck of a game. It's four overtimes.
Was it really?
Yeah. So them and he plays at South Carolina State and plays D line. Got to play a little bit. He had hurt his foot, so he didn't play as much as normal.
Yeah.
But it was a heck of a game to watch. It took like three hours and 45 minutes. So it was
Well,
crazy.
it's a good thing we did move it. I ended up being late anyway, so I'm glad we were able to carve out some time though, man. That must have been a heck of a time though. Have you been to that particular game before? Or?
I have no, I've never been. Obviously, that's kind of the HBCU national championship game.
Yeah.
So, it was really cool. Prairie View, I back when I was a player in high school, I remember they had like an 80 game losing streak
Yeah.
back in the 80s and 90s. So
They
it
were
was,
terrible. I remember reading
yeah.
about them in Sports Illustrated,
Hmm.
about like terrible, like lack of facilities. Like I remember an article, and it painted the picture of like the absolute worst program ever in America. Um, but yeah, and then oh gosh, what's the guy's name? Who's there now? Coach Jackson, right?
Yeah.
Who's there? Yeah, so that's awesome. That's pretty cool, man.
Yeah. They got up 21-0, and South Carolina State come back and beat them. So it was an interesting game. So they four overtimes, and then you got to go for two at the end.
Right.
And then third and fourth overtimes is very interesting. But was happy for him. He was happy we were there, and that was his
Yeah.
last game. That was his last game ever. So
Oh man.
he's not going to play beyond that. So, but he was a classic kid that he played 4 years of NAIA football at
Hmm.
Georgetown here in Kentucky, and
Hmm.
did really well. And he went in the portal. He had one more year left, and South Carolina State picked him up. So
There you go. Hey, opportunity is opportunity. That's pretty
that's
cool.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
Good. Well, good
So
deal. Well, let's get started, man. First question I ask everybody: talk to me about how the offensive line has played a role in some of the better teams that you've been a part of. Whether a player as a coach. Talk to me about how the O line was a part of those teams.
well, with me being, I still coach the position even as the head football coach here at Douglas, and I've really coached O line my whole life and
Mm,
played it. So I feel like our players in our program, whether you're a quarterback or running back, they know how important it is because, obviously I'm leading the whole team, and
right.
it's a very hard job to be a head football coach and coach O line. It's not easy. And I'm lucky that I have a good defensive staff at my place and I don't micromanage and let them go. But I think in some of the better teams I've had multiple guys that can play multiple spots, meaning,
Hmm.
obviously more than five. On our 22 team, and I tell our guys this all the time that won a state championship. I rotated 10 different guys.
Oh wow.
Because we were pretty deep and they deserved to play.
Yeah.
Well, I would rotate either every series or every other series with different guys. Obviously, rhythm is a coaching point. I understand that, and like this year, I only really had seven that I could go to that I felt comfortable with. So I had to really rotate tackles and guards and
Sure.
centers, and But as far as the continuity goes of great teams, I feel like you got to have a mentality of being physical. And I feel
Hmm.
like that's one of my goals as a head coach as well. Is I want my teams and opposing coaches that play us to always think we're a physical team.
Yeah.
And I think every coach says that, but when you're watching a team and you're going against somebody, does an opposing coach win, lose, or whatever come across and say, "Man, that was a physical game,"
Yeah.
and that doesn't always happen. But when you play our teams and identifying what I really want in a football team, that's a big component of it is being physical. So I think that starts with the O line. I include tight ends in that as well.
Hmm.
Tight ends are part of that in our system, and they're in a lot of our offensive line meetings. They're with me a lot for blocking scheme purposes because I don't have just a tight end guy at my high
Right.
school. So we kind of have to combo that. But I think you got to have an identity up front. The teams that have done well in my career of over 20 years have had that physicality mindset, really all throughout the offensive philosophy and system, whether or not you run or pass, because pass pro isn't passive either. So
Right.
you got to be aggressive in that too, and have technique involved. So I feel like that's a big component of winning, is
Yeah.
just having that continuity of physicality, being smart, understanding the game plan, understanding the schemes and the movement skills that are
Yeah.
necessary. And I try to portray that to every position. I want our quarterbacks and everybody, whether I'm a DB, linebacker, to understand that, offensive line isn't somewhere you just put somebody in a corner. It's a
Right.
it's a skill set, and not
Yeah.
everybody can do it. So one of my favorite memories of our 22 state champion team, and this has happened on other teams, but actually one of my favorite memories is our kid that plays running back at Ball State now. He would come down, the last couple minutes of special teams if he wasn't involved, and he would come down and do like pass set work and have a good time with it.
Yeah.
Like a normal pass set of an offensive lineman, and everybody get a kick out of it. But to me, I never said this to them, but to me that meant that our kids really bought into that process of how
Right.
hard this job is.
Right.
That they're actually asking questions about it and they're interested in it. And and I try to make we do some offensive lineman 7-on-7 stuff as a fun thing, and try to flip it the other way at times too, to where the whole team understands that everybody has a job to do, especially the offensive line.
Yeah. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head with a couple pieces. Obviously, the physicality part, which that sets your tone, and then making it fun, right? Because like you said too, not everybody early. If you take that kid and say, "Hey, man, you're going to be an offensive lineman," some kids might poo-poo it and shake their head. Um, it takes a special guy to really say like, yes, I'm going to do it. And it's not for everybody, right? Like some of those kids, hey, I've had I've had my first head coaching job. I remember we took a kid who had played tight end the year before and said, hey, you're going to be a guard. And he just was dead set against it. And 2 weeks before, or shoot, probably not 2 weeks, probably a week before our first game, we took his backup and moved him to O line. So it's like the interchange, and he ended up being a 2-year starter for us. So it's funny how it's a different mindset for each person. And like you said too, it's not for everybody. And the ones that get it are usually turn out to be pretty good and enjoy the process of it.
Yeah, and it's like, you bring up a good point too about, guys not buying into it. I actually have a couple stories on that. Number one is two of my starters. We graduated 7 senior offensive linemen a year ago.
Oh boy.
So a bunch of those guys signed, either Division One through NAIA.
Hmm.
So my cupboard was pretty bare this year. So, and our schedule is pretty tough in the state of Kentucky. So, I actually had to move 2 guys that played linebacker as freshmen on our
Hmm.
freshman team, and they really struggled with that mentality, as you're saying, early, and fought me on it, and but I kept working with them,
Hmm.
trying to keep buy-in, because to me, I want to try to help these kids if they want to go to the next level.
Right.
Well, if I'm not being mean, but if I'm running a 5 flat, 5-1, 5-2, 4, I'm not playing linebacker at the next level,
Right.
So, but that's a pretty good athlete for line if you want to buy into it. But eventually, to make a long story short, those 2 guys ended up starting every game for me this year as sophomores, and
Oh wow.
really played well down the stretch, in
Yeah.
the playoffs, and because they were definitely undersized compared to some other guys. And, they got to put on some more mass this off season, but, really bought into it and saw, kind of what I was selling, as you said. The other thing is I got a kid that just got invited that played at UK. Obviously, he's very talented, very good.
Hmm.
Jagger Burton just got invited to the East West Shrine game. And, he called me a couple weeks ago and told me that he was going to get invited to the East West game. And, typically that means you can be a third to seventh round draft choice if you
Right.
perform well and all that. But he talks to me all the time about sitting in my classroom as going into a sophomore year, and he thought he was a D lineman, pass rusher, tight end. And I was like, in my opinion, you need to move the offensive line. And he kind of had the same sentiments and obviously eventually bought into it. He tells
Right.
me that story all the time. Like, thank you for, putting me through that adversity when I thought I was something else.
Right.
It's worked out where now he's probably going to have a chance to play in the National Football League. So not every kid has that, story. He had that ability, always has. But I just use, those couple examples about what you're
Yeah.
saying. Definitely see a lot of similarities there.
Well, and that kind of the perfect segue to my next question. That kind of you would know kind of what it takes to play at that level because most I didn't realize this until you and I had known each other for a long time on social media, and I didn't realize this until after the fact. You were a 4 year starter at Marshall. You
Yes, sir.
started 52 straight games. You were there, and like obviously you missed. I think you just missed Randy Moss,
Yep.
but you were there with some of the heydays of Marshall football, man, and you're involved in one of my favorite offensive line memories, and I'm sure one of your memories of the game where they carried Byron Leftwich down the field, and anybody listening, any offensive line coach has seen the clip. It's one of the coolest things ever. But you were in that obviously in that game. You were involved with all that. Talk to me a little bit about your time at Marshall and just how you ended up there, I guess, and just the
Yep.
amount of fun that you guys we as I was in college, I think, and watching you guys, it just seemed fun. Talk to me
Mhm.
a little bit about those years.
Yeah, so I appreciate you bringing that up. In high school, in today's terms, I probably wouldn't have been, I was a good high school player. I was a big guy.
Mm-hmm.
I was 315 my senior year, but I ran really well in the 40. So Marshall offered me, then, I got a lot of interest for some other schools, but at the time, Marshall was really good. They were coming off, the Chad Pennington, Randy Moss years
Mm-hmm.
in 90, 97, 98, 99. Coach Bob Pruitt was one of the winningest coaches in the 90s. And for me, it was about 40 minutes from my hometown. So my family was important to me.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to go somewhere where somebody from my family didn't have to travel 8-10 hours every
Right.
game.
Right.
For some families, it's not a big deal, but for me, it was. And because both my parents were still, working, and obviously, they weren't retired or anything. So
Right.
yeah, that was important to me. So anyway, I went to Marshall as a true freshman. I played in a traditional wing T offense, which everybody knows is gap down backer and
Right.
down block and all that stuff. So I didn't know what a pass set was. I didn't know anything about it. But my offensive line coach was Mark McHale, which recently passed away from cancer, and he coached the NFL Europe. But I was blessed to play for him for 4 years,
Mm-hmm.
and I learned a tremendous amount from him. He taught me basically from scratch on a lot of things. And I was able to go in. I was physically strong. I put the time in the weight room in high school,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to do a lot of that on my own. We didn't have a lot of weightlifting classes in the school building at that
Right.
time. I was a
That didn't exist. You and I are
Mhm.
roughly the same age. That didn't
Yep.
exist back then. Weightlifting was, hey guys, in the summertime, the gym's open from
Mhm.
3 to 4. See you there.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah, exactly. And my high school coach never ran. And again, he's a legendary, he's passed away now, but won over 330 games.
Oh wow.
He was at my high school for, 30 plus years. But he didn't run an off season program. He
Right.
didn't do the things you do today. And like I said, I was a three sport guy. I played basketball until my senior year of high school, and then also was a 3-time state champion in shot put and discus. So I was busy all year long.
Right.
But my parents really instilled hard work in me, and I'm not gonna apologize about a lot of the hard work that I did. I would get up
Right.
on my own at 6 a.m. at least 3 times a week. I didn't do it as much during football season, but I did it in basketball and track. and I would get up Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I would do a full body workout at the local gym.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would go to school, and then I would go to basketball practice, or I would go to track practice. So it was kind of like a grind and a job, like college
Right.
football is, you know. So for me, it was kind of an easier transition than most freshmen, I think, because I was kind of used to doing a lot of those aspects.
Yeah.
We had a couple guys get hurt. I thought I was going to come in and redshirt. I mean, I didn't know any better.
Right.
A couple guys got hurt, and boom, I'm starting against Southeast Missouri State, and then I have to go to Michigan State. So it happened very fast.
Right.
And then from there, I kind of didn't look back. Played against a lot of NFL guys, throughout my career. But I credit Coach McHale for really teaching me a lot about offensive line play, just about the whole position.
Mm-hmm.
He had us. I played tackle, and we were a spread offense at that time. Obviously, he would have us reading coverages for blitzes. We would
Oh
have
wow.
we would have yeah we would have quizzes. We would have different things, and I think it really helped prepare me for being. I was a head coach at the age of 25, which to
Mm-hmm.
me, I didn't know anything at that time. But I think it really helped prepare me for, just the overall coaching aspect.
Right.
I knew I kind of wanted to get into coaching when I got done playing.
Okay.
But, that was kind of my uncle coached 20 plus years. He's still coaching. My grandfather was a high school official for a long time, helped start our youth league.
Mm-hmm.
My dad didn't coach, but my mom actually probably liked football more than my dad. So it's kind of in my DNA,
Yeah.
If you were to ask a lot of people back home the McPeek last name, they're associated with football,
Right.
which I'm not going to apologize for. But yeah, it was a heck of a run. Played with a lot of great players. And I was inducted in the Hall of Fame last
Yep.
September at
Yep. I
Marshall.
remember
So
seeing.
yeah, so it was a great time. Played with a lot of great players. A lot of offensive linemen I got a chance to play with are now high school coaches like myself.
Yeah.
There's a lot of guys I played with in those 4 years that are in the coaching profession. Lou Anarumo was on our staff, which was with the Bengals. Now he's with the Colts, and has had a chance to and has had some chances to be an NFL head coach. And the list can go on. I mean, we played for a lot of great players and
Mm-hmm.
with a lot of great coaches. So, and we won, and
Right.
that's the thing. Like, Coach Pruitt had a very good formula on how to win. Obviously, you have to have talent, you have to have good players, but there's a whole process to it. You have to know your why, you have to know how to do things. You got to know your system. You got to teach your players what that represents, and then you have to play this together as one. So,
Right.
I know that's what every coach is going to say, and that's coach speak. But to do it all and see it all come to fruition is really really cool as a player and now as a
Yeah.
coach, and just being around the game as long as I have.
What would be, and you might not be able to give me just one. What would be your favorite Marshall memory if you could pick just one?
Obviously, probably even though we lost the game in Akron, that was a really cool moment.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's like iconic to be able to do that. And I tell people all the time, we did that with no words being said.
Right.
You just kind of look at each other, and he looks at you, then you do it. And a lot of people know he had a broken shin bone,
Yeah.
and in today's world, there's no way they'd let you come back in the game.
Right.
But he left the site, went on an ambulance to a hospital, got an X-ray, came back, and they put him back in the game because he
Yeah.
wanted to come back in. All right. So my point is that wouldn't have happened,
No.
but that's obviously probably one. But as far as a win goes, we came back from down 38-8 against East Carolina in the GMAC Bowl in Mobile, where they now play the Senior Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
In 2001, David Garrard, which longtime NFL guy with the
Yep.
Jaguars, had a great career. They were smoking us. I mean, we played really bad. They were up 38-8 at halftime. But anyway, we came back and won in triple overtime, 68. I think it was 64-61.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
yeah. So I passed that 74 times in that game.
Oof.
74 times. And I remember it took me a long time to recover after that game.
I'm sure,
So,
man.
yeah.
Wow.
So, but Byron
70, wait,
finished.
74 times in that game. Did you pass set 74 times your entire high school career?
No,
That was
definitely not. No, no,
yeah, that's crazy.
no, no.
It was such a, again, like I said, such a fun offense to watch back. I really nowadays, and you know, you're active in social media and stuff. I wonder if I could go back and find some of those playbooks online, some of that Marshall stuff, and look at it. It'd be interesting to see kind of what, and you know, and again, this is kind of, I'm getting off topic here a little bit, but like you looking at what you guys did in those early 2000s, do you still see some of that in the game today, or is it kind of, obviously the game's ever evolving, right? Do you see
Sure.
some of the kind of the
Yeah.
small pieces of it?
I think, few years ago with obviously with Leach and Tony Franklin and all the
Hmm.
10 personnel stuff. I think that was really big for a long time in football, and it still has its merit, right?
Yeah,
But I do think, back in our Marshall days, we did a lot of check with me's because we had good quarterbacks. We had students of the game. I
yeah,
mean, you talk about, I mean, I didn't get a chance to play with Chad Pennington, but he was a Rhodes Scholar, super smart. I
right,
mean, you had him, and then you had Byron Leftwich, which, Byron obviously is one of the smartest football players and competitors I've ever been around. So sometimes our coaches wouldn't overcomplicate things. They would
right,
go run check, pass check based upon numbers in the box. And he would look at it based upon safeties and he would call a run or he'd call a pass. Back then it wasn't necessarily called an RPO, but we would tag a lot what we called zombie screens off of it,
okay,
which is just fast screens.
right,
You see that everywhere in football now. There wasn't as much of the post snap RPO stuff as there
right,
is today back then, but a lot of 10 personnel stuff, a lot of compressed stuff, obviously heavy passing game.
yeah,
We had quick game and drop back game and screens and, everything that everybody runs today, but it was a lot of spread out, formations. I
yeah,
think right now in football, you're kind of seeing it all gets full circle, right? Defenses are getting really good at defending 10 personnel and matching your personnel. So I do think you're starting to see a lot bit more of a shift back to a lot of tight end stuff, a lot of
yep,
12 personnel stuff. I know we do a lot of that at Douglas. We're in and out of a lot of two back stuff, two tight ends. We even have three tight end packages at times. So, I think defenses were getting really good at defending that stuff. Now it's back to, are you going to match that big personnel on the field? So it's interesting. The whole game is, checkers and chess
oh
and
yeah,
moves and it is what it is, right? You're going to be good at some things and not as good on others, but definitely a cool offense to play in.
yeah. I can imagine it. It's like I said, it was a blast to watch. You talked a little bit. You mentioned about your first head coaching experience. I think I can't remember if you said it or not, but for the listeners, you're 25 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about going from that and then obviously getting your next head coaching experience at Frederick Douglass in
Yep.
2020.
Yep.
How much, just what did you look at when you got that job in 2020 and say, oh, I remember I'm not doing this, I'm not doing this,
Mm-hmm.
how much had you grown as a coach, and are there things that you did look at and say, oh, you know what, this was great back then, I'm gonna take that. Were there any of those kind of things that you found?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I was a lot more things bothered me at 25 because you think you can control every single detail.
Yep.
You don't know what you know, right? So,
Right.
and coaches are, control. You want to control things by habit anyway, right? So
Yes.
that's kind of in our DNA and what we kind of want to do. And in my opinion, I don't think you can be a head coach and not be a little OCD and not be organized. That's just my opinion. You
Yes.
better, and if you're not, you better have some guys that are around you.
Yes.
But the organization of it, obviously I've gotten a lot better at the way
Hmm.
we practice. You know, my first head coaching job, I was at a small school and a single A school, so we didn't have a lot of guys that just played one way.
Right.
We had to practice an offensive practice and a defensive practice, and how do you maneuver that with your special teams and things like that. And you're working, obviously, you don't have as big a coaching staff. So, you're looking at that as well. With some things that I did with toughness and in the weight room and physicality, I think some of that carried over to 2020 when I became the
Mm-hmm.
head coach at Douglas. But obviously, things that I could get away with back then, you can't do today, right?
Right.
So, like some of the crazy workouts, and there might be portions of the country that can still get away with that, but with social media and things and the way things are today, it's very difficult. And I actually have a player that played for me in 2012. During my first head coaching experience, that's on my staff now at Douglas, and he tells our players all the time, "You're lucky you don't have the 28-year-old Nate McPeek." So, so definitely a lot more calmer on
Yeah.
some things, and I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. There's some things that I need to grow from and learn from, and mature like we always do, right?
Right.
So there's some things that you can always go back to, but I would say my core principles of winning are the same.
Mm-hmm.
Of kind of getting everybody to mesh under the why and understanding what that is. And that's really hard with coaching kids today, is them to understand the big picture, because a
Yeah.
lot of things are going through with social media and their Instagrams and their TikToks and all that. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it's a lot of self-image, right? It's a lot
Yes.
of selfishness. It's a lot of things, and that's not football. I mean, you can't win football games by just being selfish.
Right.
So really getting the kids to buy into that's a very difficult task in today's world, in my opinion. So you have to really start that in January. Every team's different. Like my team this year, we went 8-5. We didn't make the state championship game, which is an expectation of ours.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it's a failure. But at the same time, I look back at what we had and who we were and who we had playing, and it's probably the best coaching job I've ever done.
Right.
And our staff, we were in every game but one. We could easily finish 9-1 in the regular season. So, but again, that goes back to those core principles of what I believe in, and that started back when I was 25.
Right.
But obviously, how we practice, because at Douglas we have a lot more numbers. We're in the highest classification. We got 1,800 kids in our high school, so we're in 130, 140 range, 9 through 12.
Right.
So for me, I try to get guys to to platoon as much as I can. Kind of figure out freshman year, going into their sophomore year, what they kind of fit as. And for me, I'm going to try to put them in the best spot to get recruited,
Right.
because if that's something that they want to try to do, that's what I want to do for them.
Right.
With them and their parents are willing to make that investment, I want to do that. Now, with that being said, it's very difficult right now for high school players with the portal and the way the landscape of college recruiting is. That's another
Correct.
discussion for another day. But
Right. We
um,
could go a long time about that one.
no doubt, no doubt. But yeah, to answer your question, I would say, obviously the patient side, the way we
Yeah.
practice has evolved. Obviously, the offensive systems. I was predominantly a wing T guy early on in my
Okay.
career. I obviously played in a wing T offense in high school. And I like the gap scheme stuff, but within that gap scheme stuff, I'm always going to do that. But I also incorporate a duo into it as well,
Mm-hmm.
where I'm teaching a lot of the same double teams and things like that in our offensive system with our RPO game and our play action pass game. And it's been really good for us.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. It's I look back at uh again, this is our you and I need you and I need to talk some more because our timeline are almost identical. I remember I was 20, it was 2010 or 11, and I actually got offered my first head coaching opportunity, which I turned it down. I didn't think I was ready. We never are ready, right? No one's ever ready for that job until you step into it. And I look back at when I did get my first opportunity, at some of the mistakes I've made, and some of the things that I look back on and kind of just shake my head and say, what the heck was I doing? What was, and you can attribute it to being young, first time head coach, but there's always things that we can learn from, whether as a head coach and assistant coach, and I think that's important to us as coaches too, and the maturation and the development of our coaching styles, right? It's adaptation and learning and moving on to the next bit and the next piece. And the great ones are able to do it, right? The ones who aren't as successful, they I don't want to say they're bad at it, but it's harder for them to make those changes, I guess, in their styles, and it shows, and especially in today's era of football, like you kind of alluded to.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Like for me, like 5 years ago, I have some really good 27 kids, that are going to be seniors, that probably would have been power four guys,
Right,
but I'm trying to get these guys and parents to understand, like, I don't like it. I hate it for the high school players. I'm not mad at the college coaches. They're just
right,
playing the hand that they're dealt, right?
right,
I'm not mad at them. Of course, I'd rather, they got to win. They don't have time to wait 3 years on a high school player anymore. So
right,
for me, I'm having just on that aspect, I got to put aside my frustrations, as frustrated as I am with the whole thing, and help the kid, right? So, like, for me, I think it puts more pressure on the player, the parents, or the families, and the high school coaches to develop that kid earlier,
right,
and that's hard, right? Because some kids develop later,
right,
right? So, like, a kid that we have that may sign at a smaller school, they may end up playing at a bigger school, like the kid I was, referring to earlier.
right,
He was a good high school player, but he developed a little later, right? So, like, for me to get them to understand that, they may not be able to go to Kentucky or LSU right now. They may have to go to a MAC or FCS or a D2 school and do what they're supposed to do,
right,
and then use the portal to their advantage, right? And, just something as simple as like body weight, like 5 years ago, college coaches may take a chance on a kid that's 170, whereas now they're not going to.
right,
You're going to have to look the part two in high school. And again, that puts pressure on the home, the coaches, the strength conditioning part, right? All the things that I believe in as player development. But obviously, I'm at a public school and we don't have in those funding.
right,
So like for me, like, where do I put those resources and accolade those for the betterment of the player? I have to really set aside my frustrations to try to help the player, and even then it may not be enough, right?
right,
So like, that's the frustrating part for me, but you got to learn and adapt. That's what adapting is right now. As much as I'm old school and I hate it and I believe
right.
in just those principles, you have to really adapt to the landscape of football, or you're going to get left behind.
That's no doubt about it. And like you said too, I think it shows the kind of person you are, the kind of character you are, though, that you know, you love to win, you want to win, but you also want to see your young men be successful, and you're doing, you and your staff are doing everything you can for those guys. So I think that's obviously, like I said, that's a testament to you guys. So I applaud you guys for that for sure.
Thank you, Coach. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, all right. Last question I got for you, and then I'll get you out of here. If you could build a Mount Rushmore of offensive linemen from guys you played with, guys you've coached, or guys you were maybe a fan of as a kid or now, who would be on that 5-man offensive line?
Um, I For me, I'm a big Bengals fan, so long suffering. Long suffering. I
Yeah.
never thought I would see a Super Bowl in my life, and we almost beat the Rams.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I'm going to see another one in my lifetime, but I was a big Anthony Munoz fan.
Yep.
I was always an offensive lineman. I was always over the weight limit as a kid, so I never got to run the ball. So I really, really respect, him. Trent Williams is another one I really like now that
Oh,
I
that's a
show
good
a
one.
lot to our guys with the 49ers.
Yeah.
He's really, really good. Lane Johnson is another one that I really, really like to watch with the Eagles.
Yeah.
Obviously, an elite guy. Kelsey, the center that retired for the Eagles,
Yep.
just seeing, because he was a little undersized, right? And
Mm-hmm.
he was just a great athlete and can move around. And those are kind of like, I mentioned Jagger Burton that I coached. I think, obviously he's not in the NFL right now, but, he reminds me, if he can get some breaks or two,
Yeah.
he reminds me, I'm not saying he's going to have that type of great career by any means, but just movement skill wise at center,
Yeah.
he reminds me of some of those things. Obviously, starting 2 years in SEC, and he was an all SEC guy this year. And then another guy that I coach is Walker Parks. That was a 4 year starter at Clemson. He just got finished. He was able to play 6 years, but he had a lot of injuries. He had multiple ankle surgeries. He's
Yeah.
had multiple knee injuries. Just nature of the position, right?
Yep. Yes, it
And
is.
I hate it for him because he could have been an NFL, and now he's probably going to have to, give up that dream or at least wait on it for a while. And I know how the NFL works. I had a chance to be with the Packers in '04, but I had a low back operation. I had turf toe surgery like Joe Burrow had a few months
Yeah.
ago. And I never quite felt the same after those
Right.
surgeries. Now I've had three. I had major neck surgery last December, so it takes a toll on you.
It
But
does.
I would go back and do it again because I think football players and coaches are a little crazy.
We are.
Um, so,
Not a little crazy. We're a lot crazy, but it's
oh
a good
yeah,
kind of crazy.
it is. But obviously, I'm 43, but I feel a lot older than that, going through all the surgeries I've had to go through. But I mentioned some NFL guys. I'm sure I'm missing some really good ones. I was a big Joe Thomas fan too.
Hmm.
With Wisconsin and just the movement skills that he has, and I could go on and on. But those two guys that I coached at Douglas with Jagger and Walker,
Yeah.
not because they're played in major Division I football, but just the type of people that they are. They're great
Yeah.
people. We have a great relationship today. I think Walker may go into coaching. He's going to leave Clemson with his master's, and Jagger's going to leave with his undergrad at UK and trying to make a run at this thing in NFL. But just the type of people that they are, they give to themselves and their teammates, and just great ambassadors for the game of football. And we need that in the future. So
Yeah.
I think that's really important. And like I said, no line, no shine. You got to be great up front to be any good.
No doubt about it. No doubt. All right, man. Well, do me a favor. Drop your Twitter handle for anybody listening where they can find you, and any
Sure.
other information for the listeners.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you and what you give and all the content. And it's been great to get to know you. And I wish you
Yeah.
nothing but the best. And thanks for bringing offensive line play. And I know there's a lot of people out there that do, but I feel like you do a really good job with the platforms. And I feel bad I can't get on more and interact. But being the head football coach at our place is a 13-month job, so it's very difficult. This time of year I got a little time and some time, in the winter and spring, but it's very difficult. But my Twitter is at Coach Nate McPeek. Feel free to message me, add me, whatever. Be willing to learn from you guys. Just like if you have questions for me, and anything about program philosophy or offensive line
Hmm.
play or schemes or anything like that. Feel free to contact me, or if we can do anything at Douglas High School here in Kentucky, please let me know.
Awesome, man. Well, again, I appreciate you coming on and talking. Like you said, it's been great. It's great getting to know you a little bit more, and it's always nice to talk face to face or screen to screen, I guess. But
Yes, sir.
wish you the best, man, and we'll talk again soon.
Yes, sir, Coach. I really appreciate it. Thank
All
you.
right, man. Take care.
You too.